No nukes, no terrorists, no missiles. Okay, we just talked about that right there. They clearly still have missiles. In fact, our own supply has been depleted.
Bring the UAE closer to us.
Our own supply has been depleted by 1/3 to one half.
Because we have a ceasefire.
Please like, subscribe, and share. Progressive commentator Adam Mockler joined Abby Phillip's panel to challenge the usual lineup of MAGA talking points and push back against right-wing misinformation. We're going to break down some of the biggest moments from the debate, and I'll share my thoughts along the way. Let's jump right into it together.
Tonight, explosive new reporting severely undercutting President Trump's claims about Iran's missile capabilities. According to the New York Times, assessments show that Iran has restored operational access to 30 of the 33 missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz, which could threaten U.S. warships and oil tankers. Only 3 of the missile sites are totally inaccessible. The Times also notes that Iran still has about 70% of its mobile launchers and has retained another 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile. And as the war drags on, even some of the biggest hawks are beginning to lose patience.
I don't trust Pakistan as far as I can throw them. If they actually do have Iranian aircraft parked in Pakistan bases to protect Iranian military assets, that tells me we should be looking maybe for somebody else to mediate. No wonder this damn thing is going nowhere.
When this war started, we heard 3 or 4 different things. No missiles, no nukes, no terrorists, and maybe regime change. That's what he was going for. Regime change has not happened. The IRGC is still in control. It's not going to happen. The IRGC the IRGC is so deeply embedded. The IRGC is in Iran, and they're in charge. They are so deeply embedded in Iran's institutions that you can't just get them out unless you go boots on the ground. Who's in control right now? The IRGC. Number 2, on no nukes. What they did was scatter the scientists around the country and put all of the blueprints into the cloud, so it still exists. Yes, the nuclear is, the enriched uranium is buried under rubble, but it's still in Iran. They can just rebuild, get the info from the cloud, and then rebuild again. So that takes me to no terrorism. They can still fund terrorism. They'll likely get money from this deal, and the Strait of Hormuz will likely be told 3 months from now. So they're going to keep taking money. What was the last one? No nukes, no terrorists, no missiles. Okay, we just talked about that right there. They clearly still have missiles. In fact, our own supply has been depleted.
Bring the UAE closer to us.
Our own supply has been depleted by 1/3 to one half.
Because we have a ceasefire.
Captain Eyebrows says there's nobody in charge. They're just cardboard cutouts. So how are the cardboard cutouts, nobody in charge, keeping the strait closed? Should the United States not just be able to waltz in there and just take everything over if nobody's in charge, if they're just cardboard cutouts?
Because they successfully convinced Trump that they're at a negotiating table, and yet it's been a month and there's been no deal. Actually, several of you brought this up. Who are they negotiating with, and what is the actual strategy? The son of Iran's last Shah just spoke earlier, and he says there are too many mixed messages coming out of this White House. Listen.
You have to have a clear message. You have to have a clear strategy of aiming for putting an end to this regime, allowing for people to revolt, allowing for elements within the military and security forces to defect and join with the people. All of that has to be coordinated as a coherent strategy. You cannot send mixed signals. On the one hand, say people need to rise, and at the same time say, wait, we are negotiating. It's confusing the hell out of everyone.
And you can't rely on it. And like you said, who are we negotiating with? A cardboard cutout. That does not look good for the president if he is not defeating.
Please like, subscribe, and share. The issue isn't just that Donald Trump prefers dealing with transactional people. It's that he spent years trying to bully others into getting his way. In business, he could avoid paying bills and drag cases through court because many smaller companies didn't have the money to fight back. But countries don't work like that. You can't pressure entire nations the same way you pressure contractors or employees. That's the problem with the businessman in the White House argument, especially when Trump's record included multiple bankruptcies and a reputation that was far less impressive than the image he sold publicly. The whole art of the deal persona was largely marketing. In many cases, he simply relied on the fact that the people he dealt with couldn't afford to challenge him.
Point to thus far that we can say, hey, this is going to end tomorrow. Of course, people are worried, people are panicked. At the same time, everything you mentioned is still worth it if we make sure they can never have a nuclear weapon. It is very easy to sit here while we're all still on the face of the earth and we're all here and America's as strong as possible. But it's not that easy to say that, God forbid, they throw that bomb at us. We have no idea what could happen.
Just clarify what the Iranian regime is. It's not one person. It's not their Navy. It's not their Air Force. It is the Islamic. It is the IRGC. The IRGC Navy absolutely does exist. That's why the Strait is still closed. But the IRGC is deeply embedded within the institutions, and former IRGC members actually inhabit the banks colleges, all the institutions within Iran, and they have an incentive to never let their power go because they were seen committing awful acts. So you have
I know.
I think
They're
agree on
built
that.
for
I think
this
we all
moment.
agree on
The
that.
IRGC is absolutely built for this moment. And this is
I would
something that I
argue
think the
America is
president,
built for this
let me just
moment.
say, I think the president is used to dealing with other transactional individuals and even other transactional countries, frankly, like China. This is an ideology that we're talking about here.
It's not that Donald Trump is used to just dealing with other transactional figures. He's used to being able to bully people into doing whatever he wants them to do. In his businesses, he'd just not pay for things and know that the people that he would be going up against in court didn't have the resources that he had, so he could just wait them out. When you're dealing with countries, it's not that way. You can't just bully an entire country into doing whatever you want to do. This is the fallacy of having a quote-unquote businessman in the White House, particularly when it was a failed businessman, a guy who had multiple bankruptcies, and really wasn't this negotiator that he's made out to be. The art of the deal was all nonsense. He just didn't pay his bills, and most of the people that he dealt with didn't have the money to fight back.
These people have all the time in the world to wait. They'll take all the pain.
And one agreement does not kill an ideology. And so even if we come to an agreement and they say we will not build nuclear weapons, the next day they can start again.
Why do we celebrate Obama's deal?
That's right.
I'm not saying Obama's deal was perfect, but at least
people celebrated that deal.
steps forward. What I'm saying is that you're not going to bomb out an ideology unless you eliminate a whole country, and I think we all would say
you know
that.
What you can do to de-radicalize is oftentimes integrate a country into the global economy, and that's what the nuclear deal did. We integrated Iran, we had oversight in Iran, and it was better than whatever the hell we have.
And
now.
we delayed their ability to get a nuclear weapon.
We've talked about this with you on the show for several months now at this point, and we have been told that by this point, they would have to capitulate, that the blockade alone would force them to the negotiating table. That really has not happened. And not only that, but they're rebuilding their missile capabilities. They still have all the nuclear material in their possession. So, as Adam often asks, what are we getting from all of this bombing?
Well, we might get more bombing if they actually do get close to what the New York Times is reporting. I mean, obviously, the White House has pushed back on some of the claims about their capabilities and their access. I think one can reasonably look at how they're acting right now, and they're certainly not using those missile sites at this point. If they do, in fact, have access to it, I think the president doesn't want to get involved more so militarily. He's giving them every opportunity. The blockade is, in fact, working. Their economy is weakened. It's going to take some time, and I think that's the one thing that the president, just from a messaging standpoint, is in a really tough spot. He's not going to come out and say this is going to take 6 months, or you cannot put that kind of, you cannot put that kind of timeline on any of this, because you're basically telling the enemy that all you have to do is wait this out for X amount of time. So politically, that puts him in a tough spot. But as I've said, and I do think that this is bearing out as truth, he's willing to take political hits because he thinks what's happening now, the end goal is the right thing. And I agree that the end goal is the right thing. It is.
He's willing to take political hits because he is an idiot and he doesn't know what he's doing.
Reasonable, and you've made a very good point about whether or not it's worth it, the pain that the American people are feeling. We should be having that conversation. It's important to have that conversation. He's taken a stance, and now the response is going to be political.
The problem is, you said he can't say 6 months or a year, but he did. He said a week. Like everything you're saying he can't do, he already has done, and he's done it incorrectly. And so then that makes people feel confused. And then you get reporting, you hear in June that their stockpile was under rubble. Like, well, just no, he didn't say under rubble. He said it was basically eliminated. Obliterate, thank you. That reporting doesn't match up. So I think the American people actually agree, you and I agree, and probably everyone at this table, that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And I think if the president from the very beginning was more honest and said, we're committed to this until the end, and not put premature or unnecessary or just ambitious deadlines that we all knew were false, and said, and you know what, Americans, I need you to go with me on this because you will experience some pain, but I am committed. But he hasn't done that.
He said it's fine. One point.
Sure, that's what we're here for.
So had he said that from the beginning, would any of the reaction from folks on the left, his critics, been any different than what it is now?
But at least he would be acting with some integrity and honesty. Right now, if you don't believe in the war, maybe you don't believe in the war, but I think that right now, he's talking out of two sides of his mouth, and so it is much easier for me to be a lot critical of him because he's being inconsistent.
But here's the thing. I mean, I think it feels to me like it's a lot simpler than this. You just said that at least he took a stance. Well, it seems like the stance that he took may have been a massive miscalculation. And if that is the case, that's a leadership test.
Yeah.
Leaders either make good decisions or they make bad decisions. And it's possible that right now, We are living through a bad decision and the consequences.
Please like, subscribe, and share. At the end of the day, I don't fully agree with Ashley Allison here. I don't think changing the messaging about nuclear weapons would have made much difference. A lot of Americans feel like they've seen this same story play out again and again, and they're exhausted by it. They don't want another war involving countries that never attacked the United States in the first place. For many people, this brings back memories of conflicts like Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, and Korea. Long, costly wars that led to massive spending, loss of life, and years of instability. More and more Americans are saying they don't want trillions of dollars poured into another conflict. They don't want U.S. troops risking their lives, and they don't want civilians overseas suffering while defense contractors and political insiders profit. That's why all the spin from the MAGA panelists, including the guy Adam Mockler jokingly dubbed Captain Eyebrows, isn't really changing minds. I also loved seeing Adam Mockler laughing off some of those arguments during the segment. As concerns about gas prices and the economy continue growing, public support for another major conflict could keep falling even further, and all the smirking and head-shaking from the MAGA commentators on. Abby Phillip's panel won't change the fact that many Americans simply don't want more war. But let me know what you think in the comments. Are you siding more with the MAGA panelists, or with Adam Mockler and Ashley Allison, who argue that the American people are tired of these kinds of conflicts? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.